There's a reason people don't hear you. A reason your words land flat. A reason that no matter how much truth you speak, the room goes quiet. Not in reverence, not in respect, but in disinterest. And here's the brutal part. It's not because you're wrong. It's not because you're weak. And it's definitely not because you don't matter. The truth is far harder to swallow. People don't hear you because they can feel you. They feel the fracture inside you the moment you open your mouth. They sense the part of you that's still chasing validation, the part that still argues with shadows, the part that still bleeds when it's ignored. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But hidden beneath those words is something darker, something he didn't say outright. People don't follow your words. They follow your energy. They follow your tone. They follow your conviction. And if that energy is fractured, so is your message. So is your impact. So is your ability to be heard in a world where everyone is screaming just to avoid being forgotten. You're not invisible, but right now. You're broadcasting pain, disguised as logic, disguised as opinion, disguised as authenticity, and people can feel it. They know when your words are coming from a wound instead of a center, from a need instead of a knowing. And here's the hardest truth. No one, not your friends, not your family, not even the people who love you, wants to be pulled into a conversation where someone is secretly trying to fix themselves through attention. This isn't a video about how to speak better. It's not about sounding smarter, arguing harder, or forcing people to respect you. This is about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to be heard, and yet is heard anyway. Because when you shift your source of power from outer approval to inner truth, people don't just listen. They remember you. The moment you realize what's really happening, slow down for a second. I want you to ask yourself this. Have you ever poured your heart into a conversation and watched the other person check their phone? Have you ever shared something raw, vulnerable, real, and their reply was silence? Have you ever felt invisible? No matter how articulate, kind, or emotionally available you tried to be, it's not in your head. You're picking up on something very real. But here's the twist. It's not the world that's broken, it's the pattern, the invisible loop you've been trapped in. Nietzsche had a word for it: resentment, the quiet, unconscious bitterness that grows inside people who feel powerless but don't know how to reclaim themselves. And when resentment speaks, people tune out, not because your words lack truth, but because your energy leaks. At a deep, primal level, humans are drawn to power. Not aggression, not dominance. Power, the kind that radiates from someone who's whole, aligned, and unshaken. When you speak from a fractured self, your words carry something toxic: resentment, desperation, unprocessed hurt, and people instinctively step back. Not because they don't care, but because, deep down, they can feel the wound beneath your words. The first test here's your challenge. Can you accept this truth without defensiveness? Can you sit with it, feel the sting of it, and see it clearly without blaming the world? Because if you can, then what comes next will change everything. The reason people don't listen to you isn't just how you speak. It's why you speak. Most people speak to be seen, to fill silence, to prove they exist, to be validated by someone else's reaction. But real power, the kind of psychological gravity that makes people lean in when you talk, begins the moment you no longer need to be heard. That's the paradox. The less you chase approval, the more magnetic you become. Breaking the pattern. Why is this so hard? Because most of us were never taught how to sit in silence without shrinking. We were taught to perform, to impress, to to be so likable that rejection becomes impossible. But Nietzsche's philosophy tears this illusion apart. He believed that most people, even the ones who seem strong, are secretly ruled by resentment. They want to be seen as good, as noble, as enlightened, but underneath it all, they're still trying to win, still trying to prove themselves to the parent who ignored them, the friend who left, the lover who never listened. That unresolved war lives inside your voice. It leaks into your tone. It hides in your pacing. It burns behind your eyes, and people feel it, even when you darn the moment you stop trying to perform your worth. Your presence becomes undeniable. The second you stop chasing approval, your words stop sounding like noise and start landing like truth. People don't respond to words, they respond to tones. And if you don't heal the part of you that's still broadcasting, please understand me, no one will. Here's where right gets even more difficult. Because once you realize this, you'll want to fix it overnight. You'll want to erase all neediness, all insecurity, all emotional hunger, and speak from a clean slate. But that's not how this works, because the very impulse to be stronger is still coming from the need to be liked. The only way to fix this is to stop performing, to let the silence burn, to say less and mean more, to be okay with not being understood, not being praised, not being validated, and that is fine. But it's also the shift, thatch and perseverating, because once you stop performing for attention, your words become pure. They start to carry weight, not because they're perfect, but because they come. Let me show you how this plays out with a real story, maybe ever known, that feels familiar. There's a man, let's call him Daniel. Daniel is brilliant, introspective, philosophical, the kind of guy who could talk for hours about the meaning of life, the patterns of the mind, the way people deceive themselves. He means well, he realises. But every time he speaks, people glaze over. They change the subject. Always, they give him a half-hearted, yeah, totally, before redirecting to something essential, and Daniel feels it, that sting of invisibility. He doesn't know why ether pans, but he keeps trying harder, sharing more insight, talking more passionately. But it only makes things worse, because what Daniel doesn't realize is that his words aren't landing echoes. They're soaked in need. He's not just sharing truth. He's trying to baity truth so someone will finally see him. And people can feel that. It makes them uncomfortable. It feels like because when someone is using insight as a bid for love, the listener becomes a hostage and they pull away. But one day, Daniel breaks. He gets tired of trying. He stops performing. He lets go of being understood. And something strange happens. He says less, he listens more. And when he does speak, people lean in. Because now there's no hook, no emotional leash, just clarity, calm, presence. And suddenly people want to hire him because he fixed the thing that can't be faked. High synergy. That's what Enzi meant when he said that those who climbed the mountain do so alone, and only from the top Dovey finally get seen. Not because they yelled loud enough, but because their silence carried something no one could ignore. You have that, but you have to stop asking the world to rescue you from your own voice. You have to find stillness, and from that stillness, speak. Not to impress, not to defend, not to convert, but to witness a truth, whether they hear you or not. Because the moment your words no longer come from need is the moment they begin, Tocho. You've felt it, haven't you? That moment where silence is louder than any insult. When you share something relearned, it lands like dust. When your insight, raw, vulnerable, thoughtful, is met with glazed eyes. A polite nod, maybe a distracted scroll on a phone, and that sting doesn't just fade. It builds layer by layer. It becomes a quiet shame, the kind you carry without noticing. You begin to doubt yourself, to question if what you feel is valid, and soon, without realizing it, you start editing your truth in real time, cutting the edges off your voice so it doesn't offend, overwhelm, or bore. This is the slow death of authenticity, and it's happening to people like you every single day. But Nietzsche wouldn't have told you to speak louder. He wouldn't tell you to rehearse your truth better, or to read books on charisma or social power. No. His response would have been darker but more freeing. He would have told you are not ignored because the world is shallow. You are ignored because you are a steel, trying to be understood by people you don't yet understand themselves. That's the sickness. That's the loop. You keep handing your emotional truth to people who are still allergic. There's you. Keep explaining your inner life to people who haven't met theirs. You want to be heard, not just as a voice, but as a soul in a world that strained itself to not feel deep. And here's where this gets dangerous. Because if you don't see this clearly, you'll adapt. You'll dilute. You'll try to be relatable. You'll hide your depth inside memes, jokes, small talk, anything that keeps people from turning away. And over time, you'll become fluent in their language, but forget how to speak your own. That is Nietzsche's great warning. Not that people are weak, but that in trying to connect with the unawakened, the deep-souled comes shallow by choice. That's their old tragedy. Not being misunderstood, being reshaped by misunderstanding. So how do you avoid that? By remembering what your voice is for. Your voice isn't a tool for approval. It's not a currency for attention. It's not even a bridge for connection. Not at first. It's a mirror, a living reflection of your alignment, your clarity. And when you speak from a fractured identity, from insecurity, from spiritual hunger, from sake of unseen, your words are no longer mirrors, they're shields. And people feel that. They may not know why, but they back away. Not because you're too intense, but because you've stopped buying real. Let's talk about energy now. Not in the mystical sense, but in the psychological one. Every human interaction is a subtle negotiation of energy. Who leads, who submits, who defends. And in this invisible dance, people are constantly asking, is this person safe? Are they sleep? Do they need something from me? Do they know themselves? If your energy says, I need you to validate my pain, the answer is no. Even if your words are true, but if your energy says, I am at peace with my pain, I don't need you to understand it, but I'm offering it freely, the answer becomes. That's what Nietzsche pointed to again and again. The ideal of the Übermensch, not as a strong man, but as a self-contained being, one who no longer begs, one who lives so deeply in alignment that even their silence reaches. Now, this level of self-possession doesn't come quickly, and it doesn't come without cost. You'll lose people, you'll lose comfort. You'll lose the old version of yourself that was willing to shapeshift for scraps or for attention. But what you gain is unshakable. Let me show you how this works with another story, not from a book, but from life. There's a woman, let's call her Mira. Mira is empathic, articulate. She spent her whole life being the good listener, the one who holds space, the one who understands with Beingendest, and one day she decides to share her truth, her depression, her spiritual awakening. She dosed it carefully with elegance. But instead of connection, she's met with silence, confusion, maybe even discomfort. At first, she blamed herself. I must have said it wrong. I'm too much. Maybe I should have waited. But over time, she sees the truth. Her words weren't rejected. Her depth was, because the people around her weren't ready to hear someone who no longer needed their approval. And that's the fork in thoroughfare. One path leads back to people-pleasing, to surface living, to emotional starvation. The other leads inward, to solitude, to strength, to clarity. Mira chooses the second path. She speaks less, but when she speaks, it's with gravity. She no longer begs to be seen. She is seen not by everyone, but by those who are ready. And eventually, she becomes the kind artisan whose silence says more than herald performance ever did. This is the kind of transformation it points toward. Not the loud voice in the room, but the anchored one. That presents that doesn't flinch when misunderstood. The self that no longer argues with people who haven't done their own work. So, if you're still feeling invisible, still wondering why our words don't land, ask yourself, are me speaking from alignment or from ache? Am I sharing because it's true, or because I want to be rescued? Am I okay with not being heard as long as I didn't betray my voice? Because here's their cruel irony. The moment you stop trying to be heard is the moment you begin to be felt. Not in the ego-driven way, but in the soul-driven way. You begin to attract listeners, not audiences. You begin to build connections, not impressions. You begin to matter, not bokehs. You fought for it, but because you no longer needed it. And that's what NZ was really saying beneath all the darkness. He didn't hate people. He had a formance. He didn't worship strength. He worshipped severity. And he didn't want you to demonize us. He wanted you to stop being dominated by your own hunger for. Because when you do that, when you become self-sourced, self-fed, self-anchored, your words take on a different texture. They stop feeling like a petition. They become presence, and people notice. They don't know why, but they trust you. Not because you're agreeable, but because you're real. And in a world of mirrors, the real face always stands out. That's the power you're craving. Not applause, not validation, but resonance. The kind of resonance that can't be faked. And it only comes from this one thing. Fixing the part of you that still needs to be seen. Because once you do, the world won't be able to look away. You've spent your life trying to be heard, trying to say it right, trying to time it well, to find the words, the tone, the perfect moment. You've practiced self-awareness, you've studied psychology, you've listened more than you've spoken, and still, the same silence, the same blank stares, the same feeling that your voice echoes in tunes that never echo back. But here's the truth you weren't ready for before. The most brutal one. People didn't ignore you because you were unworthy. They ignored you because you were unanchor. They could feel on some level that you weren't speaking from your truth. You speaking toward, there's like a hook, like a silent plea. Please understand. Please meet me here. Please tell me matter. And that's what repels people. Not because you're weak, but because need has a scent. It pushes people away. Not because they're cruel, but because on a primal level, they didn't want to become responsible for your. This is the deep cut. The one you've spent years trying not to feel. But Nietzsche never avoided the cut, head veen to it. He lived in it. He believed that power doesn't come from conquering others. It comes from serving the death of the self you no longer need. That death is painful because it means letting go of every performance you've rehearsed. It means letting Zalans win. It means becoming okay with not being applauded, not being praised, not being heard at all. But from that surrender, from that ego funeral, something wild is born. Presence. The kind of presence that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't try to prove. It used us. And when you speak from that place, people don't just hear you, they feel you. Because now there's no agenda, no emotional leash, no invisibility. There's just truth, clean, calm, fully integrated. That's what makes people listen, not your articulation. Not your cleverness, but your stillness. That rare, grounded stillness that only shows up when someone has finally stopped trying to be understood. You see, people are drowning in noise. They hear 10,000 voices a day, most of them trying to sell, persuade, impress. But when someone speaks with no performance in their tone, no hunger in their eyes, no need in their words, thrilled stops, because that kind of voice is rare, and rare is magnetic. But how do you get there? You go through fire. You sit with the ache of not buying hard, and you don't flinch. You let Thessalons echo back without rushing to topple it. You stop editing your truth just to make it easier to digest. You stop wrapping your words in cotton justo, be liked. And you say it raw, not loud, not soft, just true, and you let that be enough. You let your truth stand alone whether it's received or not. Because when you stop needing a reaction, your words become a free. And that freedom, that's what people can't ignore. Let me give you one final story. There was a philosopher once, not in books, not on stages, but in the way he lived. We'll call him Elias. Elias never fought for attention, never forced his insight on anyone. He rarely spoke unless it was necessary. And when did people lean in because he wasn't trying to win? He wasn't trying to teach. He wasn't even trying to bear right. He was just a leader. His presence said what his Smith didn't. When he shared an idea, it landed, not because it was loud, but because it was clean. There was no hooking it, no plea for understanding, no motionalish, and that's why it echoed. People trusted him, not because he demanded it, but because his energy could hold silence. That's what you must learn, to hold the silence. To stop fearing it, to speak not for applause, but for alignment. To stop throwing words at people who aren't ready. Because here's the most painful part. The people you most want to hear you probably never will, at least not now, because they don't have the capacity yet. And if you don't accept that, if you keep waiting for them to wake up, to see you, to circle back, you'll keep yourself small. You'll keep your voice locked in the same loop, waiting for the people who broke your clarity to be the ones who validated. That's not strength. That's spiritual paralysis. You have to free yourself from that loop. And that means grieving the idea that your voice will change them. It won't. But it can change you. It can set you free. Because once you're no longer trying to be heard by the wrong people, the right ones find you. Not because you went louder, but because you got clearer. And that clarity is what Enzimiant when he wrote, and those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane those who could not hear the music. You're not insane. You're just playing a melody others haven't learned to listen to. Don't mute it. Don't slow it down to match their rhythm. Keep playing because eventually someone will hear it. And when they do, you won't have to explain yourself. They'll just nod because of been waiting to hear it too. Asterisk, thanks for listening and watching.